What if everything you thought you knew about life was only a shadow, and the truth had been waiting, silent and patient, just beyond the veil of habit and noise? I was once convinced that power, reason, and pride were the crowns of a strong man. But then Islam came like a thunderclap in the dark. It tore through my certainty, stripped me of arrogance, and showed me that true strength is not in domination, but in surrender, not in commanding the world, but in mastering oneself. Imagine waking one morning to find the world unchanged, yet you completely reborn, the same sun, the same sky, but a heart awakened to purpose. Islam did not give me a new world, it gave me new eyes. It taught me to see meaning in the mundane, discipline in the daily, unity in humanity, and peace in surrender. So stay with me, because by the end of this journey, you may discover that the life you've been living was only the beginning. But if everything you thought was random, every victory, every heartbreak, every quiet night when you stared at the ceiling wondering why, was not chaos at all, but a carefully written line in a divine story, one in which you were always meant to play a part. What if the pain that made you doubt life itself was never meant to destroy you, but to wake you? That question burned through me like fire the day Islam opened my eyes. Until then, I lived as though purpose were a myth told to comfort the weak, as though existence were merely a sequence of coincidences, stitched together by chance. I believed success was the throne of those who fought hardest and spoke loudest. But what a fragile throne it was, built on sand, shaking with every storm of failure. When I first encountered Islam, I expected rituals and rules. I expected confinement. What I found instead was the architecture of purpose, strong, deliberate, eternal. Islam did not hand me a cage, it handed me a compass. It whispered, "You were made for more than survival." That sentence hit like thunder. For the first time, I realized that every breath I took was accounted for, every heartbeat recorded, every choice a brushstroke on the canvas of destiny. Life was not a meaningless march toward death. It was a journey toward truth. There was a day when I stood beneath the sky, the call to prayer echoing through the air, and I felt something I could not explain. It wasn't emotion, it's revelation. The words Allahu Akbar rang not as a chant, but as a declaration of reality. God is greater. Greater than my ambition, greater than my fear, greater than the chaos I mistook for freedom. In that instant, I understood that purpose does not come from power or possession. It comes from knowing why you were placed on this earth and for whom you exist. Before Islam, I chased purpose like a mirage. I thought fulfillment was hiding in success, in the applause of others, and the fleeting glitter of moments that never lasted. But Islam turned my gaze inward and upward. It showed me that true purpose begins with surrender, not conquest. To bow one's head in prayer is not an act of weakness. It is an act of awakening. The one who bows before the Creator stands unshaken before creation. That truth shattered every illusion I held about control and strength. Every teaching in Islam seemed designed to peel away the fog I had lived in. The command to pray 5 times a day was not repetition. It was rhythm, the heartbeat of a purposeful life. Each prayer was a reminder that time is not ours to waste. It is a gift we are borrowing. The discipline of fasting was not punishment. It was revelation. It showed me that hunger clarifies what abundance obscures. When you deny yourself the excess, you begin to taste gratitude. When you stop consuming without thought, you start living with intention. Even the smallest actions, greeting a stranger, feeding the hungry, speaking truth, were no longer random gestures of kindness. They were threads in a larger tapestry, each woven with intention, each seen by the one who sees all. Islam transformed existence from a blur into a masterpiece, each color deliberate, each shadow meaningful. It made me realize that every human being, no matter how lost, carries within them the divine potential to create light in the darkest corners of the world. The most shocking realization was this: Islam did not change who I was. It revealed who I had always been meant to be. It did not erase my past, it illuminated it. Suddenly, every trial, every heartbreak that once felt cruel became part of a pattern, pain with purpose. I began to see how the storms I cursed had carried me to this very shore. And I wondered how many people live their entire lives never knowing that their suffering is not senseless but sacred. There is a power in knowing that you are seen, that your existence is not an accident. Islam taught me that every soul is known by name, every struggle weighed, every prayer heard. It dismantled the cold machinery of chance and replaced it with the warmth of divine design. In that realization, I found freedom, the kind that no fortune, no fame, no human praise could ever match. The awakening of purpose through Islam is not gentle. It is a lightning strike. It rips apart the comfortable illusions of meaninglessness and demands that you live deliberately, that you rise every morning not as a wanderer, but as a witness to the truth that nothing is random, nothing is wasted, and nothing is without meaning. What if the life you've been living half asleep was never the real one at all? What if the moment you discover why you exist is the moment you truly begin to live what? If the freedom you've been chasing your whole life, the kind that makes your heart race and your soul breathe, was never found in breaking rules but in keeping them? What if the true rebellion was not defiance but discipline? That question struck me like a thunderclap the day Islam taught me that real liberation is born not from chaos but from control. I had always believed freedom meant doing what I wanted, when I wanted, without answer to anyone. I thought self-discipline was a chain forged by tradition and faith, a restriction on the wild potential of the human spirit. But Islam flipped that belief upside down. It revealed that the man without discipline is not free. He is enslaved by his desires, a prisoner of every impulse that whispers his name. Before Islam, I mistook indulgence for liberty. I ran wherever pleasure pointed, believing that the absence of boundaries meant the presence of happiness. Yet deep down, I was restless. The more I indulged, the emptier I became. It was a strange kind of hunger, one that no satisfaction could silence. I had all the tools to live freely, yet I felt shackled by my own choices. That's when I realized the body that obeys every craving becomes its own jailer. The mind that knows no restraint is never at peace. Then came the discipline of Islam, structured, precise, unwavering, 5 prayers a day, the fast from dawn to dusk, the restraint of the tongue, the lowering of the gaze, the constant mindfulness of right and wrong. To my old self, this looked suffocating. But when I stepped into it, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: clarity. For the first time, I wasn't being pulled in 1,000 directions by fleeting temptations. Every act had a boundary, every boundary had a purpose, and every purpose led back to something far greater than me. The call to prayer wasn't a command to drop everything. It was a reminder to rise above everything. The shock was this: discipline didn't shrink my world, it expanded it. It made me stronger, not smaller. I found power in saying no, dignity in restraint, and peace in structure. The man who wakes before sunrise to pray isn't a slave to ritual, he is a master of time. The one who fasts while the world feasts isn't deprived, he is free from dependence. Islam taught me that self-control isn't a burden, it's armor. It shields you from being conquered by your own weaknesses. When I first fasted during Ramadan, I expected exhaustion. What I found was power. Each hour of hunger stripped away another illusion. I realized how much I was ruled by appetite, how often I mistook comfort for meaning. But as the days went by, hunger became strength. Every pang was a reminder that I could command my body, not be commanded by it. And that, ironically, is freedom. The power to resist is the power to rule yourself. Prayer, too, became a revolution. 5 times a day, I stopped the endless noise of the world to align my heart with its creator. In those moments of stillness, I found a strange paradox. In bowing down, I stood taller. In submission, I discovered supremacy. Prostration was a declaration that I belonged not to my whims, not to society's expectations, not to the tyranny of self, but to something far purer, higher, eternal. The discipline of Islam isn't about control for control's sake. It's about mastery. It's about training the soul like a soldier, teaching it to stand firm when the world demands surrender. It's about replacing chaos with order, confusion with clarity, weakness with will. The modern world tells us to follow your heart, but hearts without guidance wander into ruin. Islam says, discipline your heart, and it will lead you to peace. That single difference changes everything. The most shocking realization was that what I once called freedom had made me hollow. The nights I spent chasing pleasure were nights of quiet emptiness. But the mornings I rose for prayer, the days I fasted, the moments I restrained my anger, those were the moments I felt most alive. There was a weight to discipline, yes, but it was a weight of purpose, not oppression. It was a kind of burden that strengthens the shoulders that carry it. Islam showed me that freedom without discipline is like a river without banks. It spills everywhere and eventually dries into nothing. But when you give that river form and direction, it carves valleys, nourishes life, and reaches the sea. That is what Islam did to me. It took my wild, restless energy and gave it meaning. It turned my impulses into intentions, my habits into worship, my limitations into liberation. What if the world has it all backwards? What if true freedom isn't in breaking boundaries, but in building them? What if the greatest act of power a human can perform is not to conquer others, but to conquer himself? What if the world you see is not divided by color, class, or creed, but only by the illusions that blind us? What if everything that separates us is a lie carefully built by ego, pride, and ignorance, while truth has been whispering unity all along? That question shattered me when Islam showed me the oneness of humanity, not as a slogan, but as a living reality. Before that revelation, I thought differences were destiny. I believed the lines between people were natural, that superiority belonged to the wealthy, the educated, or the powerful. I thought peace could be built by politics or policies. But then Islam came and tore down those walls with one thunderous truth: there is no superiority of one human over another, except in righteousness. That sentence was a storm. It didn't just challenge my thoughts, it burned them to the ground. Islam didn't ask me to tolerate others, it commanded me to see them, to see beyond the surface, beyond labels, beyond the armor of status and skin. It made me look at the beggar and the king, the worker and the scholar, and realize they all kneel on the same ground, they all whisper the same words. Allahu Akbar. In that moment, the illusion of difference collapsed. The mosque became the most revolutionary place on earth, a space where no throne existed but the one of God. The first time I stood shoulder to shoulder with strangers in prayer, I felt something electric. There was a man in worn clothes beside me and another whose perfume smelled of luxury, and yet when we bowed together, there was no distance left between us, no rank, no race, no rivalry. We were one body, one voice, one heartbeat directed toward one creator. I realized then that the equality the world keeps preaching but never practices was already living, breathing, and thriving in Islam's call to unity. Before Islam, I saw unity as an ideal, something beautiful but impossible, a dream too fragile for the real world. But Islam didn't speak in dreams. It turned unity into law, into action. It demanded I give charity not as pity, but as duty. It commanded that I greet every soul with peace. It reminded me that the blood in our veins flows from the same source, that humanity began as one and will return as one. That truth was both humbling and terrifying, because once you see the oneness of creation, you can never justify cruelty again. You can no longer look at another person's pain and say, that's not my problem. The shock was how Islam made me confront my own arrogance. It exposed how easily we build invisible hierarchies by language, by culture, by appearance, and then worship them. But Islam crushed those idols. When you bow in prayer, forehead pressed to the ground, there is no room for pride. The dirt beneath you erases every illusion of superiority. And when you rise lighter, cleansed of the poison of ego that once ruled your soul. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, didn't build unity with speeches, he built it with justice. He showed that faith without compassion is hypocrisy. When he said, none of you truly believes until he loves for his brother what he loves for himself, he wasn't setting a moral challenge. He was defining humanity itself. That command pierced my heart because I realized how often I had loved only for myself. I began to see that the true enemy of unity is not diversity, it's selfishness. Islam opened my eyes to the quiet miracle of connection. It taught me that every time I smile at a stranger, feed the hungry, forgive the one who wronged me, I am not doing charity. I'm repairing the bond that humanity has forgotten. It showed me that unity isn't about making everyone the same. It's about recognizing that beneath every difference, we share the same divine origin. Perhaps the most shocking part was this. Islam's vision of unity is not passive. It demands courage. It asks you to stand against injustice, even if the oppressor wears your skin or shares your name. It commands that loyalty to truth outweigh loyalty to tribe. That is not softness, that is moral warfare. The unity Islam calls for is not sentimental, it is revolutionary. It does not ask for comfort, it asks for sacrifice. The day I understood this, I felt something shift in me. The stranger was no longer a stranger. The poor man was no longer them. The broken world no longer seemed hopeless. It looked wounded, waiting to be healed by the mercy we've all been taught to forget. Islam didn't just open my eyes. It tore away the veil that kept me blind to my own brothers and sisters. What if the divisions we defend are the very chains that keep us enslaved? What if unity is not a dream of the weak, but the destiny of the awakened? What if, beneath all our differences, there has only ever been one truth? That we were never meant to stand apart, but to stand together. What if courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the mastery of it? What if bravery wasn't born in the noise of battle, but in the silence of conviction? That realization struck me like lightning when Islam taught me what true courage really is. I had grown up thinking courage meant defying everything, standing tall, speaking loud, never backing down. I thought it was the art of rebellion, the anthem of those who refused to yield. But Islam shattered that illusion. It showed me that real courage isn't in defying the world for yourself, it's in defying yourself for the truth. Before Islam opened my eyes, I was bold on the outside and broken within. I had confidence that impressed others, but it was built on sand, ego, pride, and performance. I wanted to be seen as fearless, yet I feared being forgotten. I spoke loudly, but I trembled at silence. Then I encountered Islam, the faith that asks not for empty noise, but for steadfastness. It taught me that true courage is not loud, it's loyal. It's not reckless, it's resolute. It doesn't roar, it endures. The first time I read about the early believers who stood before tyrants, refusing to abandon their faith even under torture, I was shaken. These weren't soldiers with armies behind them. They were ordinary men and women with extraordinary conviction. Their weapon was truth, and their shield was faith. Islam had given them something far greater than physical strength. It had given them purpose so powerful that death itself looked small in comparison. I realized then that courage isn't about survival. It's about standing firm even when survival is not guaranteed. One verse echoed in my mind again and again, "Do not fear them, fear me if you are believers." The shock of those words was indescribable. Islam redefined fear itself. It didn't tell me to be fearless. It told me to fear rightly. It taught me that the heart that fears God has no room left to fear the world. The man who kneels before his Creator can stand unshaken before kings. That is the kind of courage I had never known. There came a moment when I truly understood this. I was faced with a choice: stay silent and be accepted, or speak truth and stand alone. The safe path beckoned, as it always does. But something inside me rebelled. Islam had planted a new voice within me, one that whispered, "Stand firm. Truth is not negotiable." I spoke, and the world's approval slipped away like dust in the wind. Yet, for the first time, I felt unbreakable, because courage born of conviction is not swayed by consequence. Islam doesn't teach blind defiance. It teaches purposeful resistance. It commands believers to stand against oppression, to speak for justice, to defend the weak, even if it means standing against their own tribe or nation. That kind of courage is terrifying because it demands sacrifice. It asks you to confront not just enemies, but your own comfort. It's easy to speak truth when it costs nothing. It's another thing entirely when it costs your peace, your status, your place in the world. Islam taught me that courage is not proven in comfort. It is forged in fire. And yet, the most shocking truth was how this courage brings peace. The moment you stop fearing people's opinions, your heart becomes weightless. The moment you stop chasing acceptance, you become unchained. Islam's courage is not arrogance, it's surrender. It's the quiet power of knowing that victory and defeat are both in God's hands. So you walk forward regardless of outcome. That's the kind of bravery that doesn't fade when the applause stops, because it was never meant to please people. It was meant to please the Creator. The courage Islam awakened in me is different from anything the world glorifies. It's not found in shouting, but in patience. It's not in striking back, but in forgiving when you could destroy. It's not in boasting, but in believing when everyone doubts. I learned that faith itself is an act of courage. The courage to trust the unseen, to obey when it's hard, to hope when all seems lost. And maybe the most earth-shattering realization was this: Islam doesn't just create brave people, it creates brave souls, souls that walk through darkness holding the light of truth, souls that don't crumble when the world mocks their beliefs, souls that understand that courage isn't about being unafraid, it's about standing tall even when fear claws at your bones. What if the world's idea of courage has always been wrong? What if the truest bravery isn't in conquering others, but in conquering your own ego? What if real strength isn't found in defiance, but in devotion? What if the greatest act of courage a human can perform is to bow his head to truth, when every voice around him tells him not to talk? If peace isn't something you find, but something you surrender to? What if all your restless searching, your endless running, your hunger for control was the very thing keeping peace away from you? That question cut through my soul the moment Islam taught me what it truly means to surrender. I used to think peace was a reward, something you earned once life stopped hurting. I believed it came with success, comfort, and control. But Islam revealed a shocking truth. Peace doesn't come when you master the world. It comes when you stop trying to. It begins the moment you raise your hands and whisper, "I trust you, Allah." Before Islam opened my eyes, my peace depended on outcomes. If things went my way, I was calm. If they didn't, I unraveled. I built my peace on fragile foundations, on people, on plans, on promises that never lasted. I lived like a man trying to hold water in his hands, and the tighter I clenched, the faster it slipped away. Then Islam came and shattered that illusion. It showed me that peace is not in possession, it's in submission. It's not in controlling life, but in trusting the one who already controls it. When I first heard the meaning of the word Islam, submission, it startled me. How could surrender lead to peace? In the modern world teaches us the opposite. Fight, resist, demand, control. We're told that giving up is weakness. But Islam doesn't ask you to give up. It asks you give in, to surrender not to chaos, but to the one who designed every atom of existence. That surrender is not defeat, it's deliverance. The moment I began to live that truth, everything changed. Suddenly, every hardship had meaning, every delay had wisdom, every heartbreak had purpose. Islam taught me that nothing happens to you, it happens for you. Even pain is a message from the divine, even loss is a lesson. That realization hit harder than any philosophy or success story ever could, because it didn't just make me think, it made me breathe. I stopped fighting the current and started flowing with it, knowing that the river of destiny always leads exactly where it's meant to go. I remember a night when life felt unbearable, plans collapsing, hope fading. I sat there questioning everything. Why me? Why now? And almost involuntarily I whispered, "Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un." We belong to Allah, and to Him we return. The words carried weight like thunder, yet they felt like mercy. For the first time I realized peace doesn't come when pain disappears. It comes when you recognize that pain itself is under divine command. The same God who allows the storm also controls its end. That night I slept not because my problems vanished, but because my heart finally did what it was created to do, trust. The shocking beauty of Islam is that it flips the logic of the world. The world says win and you will be at peace. Islam says surrender and you will be victorious. The world says take control. Islam says let go. And when you do, you find a kind of peace the world can't manufacture. A peace that survives chaos. A calm that breathes even in the middle of the storm. This surrender doesn't make you passive. It makes you powerful. Because when you no longer panic over outcomes, you act with clarity. When your heart stops depending on results, your hands become free to do what's right. Islam doesn't teach laziness, it teaches reliance. You work as if everything depends on you, but you trust as if everything depends on God. That balance is the secret that modern minds have lost. And perhaps the most shocking thing is how Islam transforms even death, the greatest fear of all, into a doorway to peace. When you live surrendered, death is not an end, it's a return. The fear of loss, failure, and uncertainty evaporates because you finally realize nothing is ever truly lost to the one who owns it all. The believer walks through life unafraid, not because the world is kind, but because he knows who commands it. Peace, through surrender, is not fragile, it's indestructible. It survives heartbreak, betrayal, poverty, even death, because it's rooted not in circumstance, but in certainty. The certainty that there is wisdom behind every delay, mercy behind every pain, and love behind every command. The more I surrendered, the freer I became. My chains were never the world. They were my expectations of it. Islam broke them one by one until I learned that the most powerful thing a human can ever say is not I can, but God can. What if peace isn't something you chase, but something that's been waiting for you all along, just on the other side of surrender? What if the moment you stop demanding answers and start trusting the author is the moment your soul finally stops trembling? What if the greatest strength you will ever know is not in conquering the world, but in bowing before the one who made it? What if your entire life has been a mirror, one so polished by ego that you only ever saw yourself? What if the reason the world feels empty isn't because it lacks meaning, but because you've been looking in the wrong direction? That question hit me like a lightning bolt the day Islam taught me to lift my gaze beyond the self. For years I lived trapped inside my own reflection, chasing goals, applause, pleasure, approval. I was the sun in my own little universe, and everything revolved around me. Yet, the brighter I tried to shine, the darker life became. I mistook self-importance for purpose and self-worship for confidence. Then Islam came and shattered the mirror. It showed me that the greatest prison a person can live in is the one made of I, me, mine. The ego builds walls disguised as dreams. It whispers that happiness lies in being seen, being followed, being celebrated. But Islam tore that illusion apart. It said, look up. You are not the center, you are the creation. That realization was both humbling and terrifying, because it meant that life wasn't about what I could take, but what I could give. It meant my story was never meant to orbit me. It was written to serve something eternal. When I began to live with that understanding, everything around me changed shape. Success no longer looked like wealth, it looked like worship. Happiness was no longer in indulgence, but in gratitude. Islam turned my gaze from the fleeting to the forever. It made me realize that while the world worships fame, power, and possession, Islam calls us to something infinitely greater, to legacy. To live not for applause, but for the afterlife. To trade the temporary crown of ego for the eternal kingdom of peace. Before Islam, I used to ask, what do I want from life? After Islam, I learned to ask, what does life want from me? That question flips everything. Suddenly, time becomes sacred, not disposable. Every breath becomes a trust, not a right. Every act becomes a chance to build something beyond yourself. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said that even planting a seed is charity if done with intention. That means even the smallest moment can echo into eternity if it's rooted in purpose. That truth hit me harder than any motivational speech ever could. The shock was realizing how blind I had been. I thought purpose came from ambition, but Islam showed me it comes from alignment, aligning your will with the will of the one who created you. The world tells you to find yourself. Islam tells you to lose yourself, not in despair, but in devotion, because only when the self dissolves does the soul awaken. I learned that greatness isn't in being remembered by the world, it's in being recognized by the Creator. There was a night when I stood under a silent sky and the stars seemed to whisper something ancient, you are small, but you are seen. That realization shook me. For the first time, I understood that my life was part of a vast divine design. Every test, every joy, every heartbeat was placed with precision. I was not a random collection of cells. I was a chosen creation, entrusted with purpose. Islam didn't just make me believe in God. It made me see the world through his light. The ego had made me obsessed with control, how people saw me, what I owned, what I achieved. But Islam taught me to see everything as a gift, not a possession. My voice was a tool to speak truth. My wealth was a means to serve others. My pain was a doorway to humility. It was shocking how peaceful life became once it stopped being about me. When I started living for something beyond my reflection, I finally began to see. Islam took the microscope I had turned on myself and replaced it with a telescope. Suddenly, I could see the vastness of eternity stretching beyond this fragile world. I began to measure life not in years, but in impact. The fleeting glitter of recognition lost its shine compared to the eternal light of purpose. Every prayer, every act of kindness, every restraint against wrongdoing, it all became part of something greater than my name. And that is the miracle of Islam. It turns self-centered existence into God-centered life. It takes your gaze off the mirror and sets it on the horizon of eternity. It teaches you that the goal isn't to make the world remember you, it's to make the heavens recognize you. The most shocking truth of all is that when you finally stop living for yourself, you don't disappear, you expand. You become part of something infinite. What if the reason you feel lost isn't because life has no meaning, but because you've been searching for it in the reflection of your own face? What if peace begins the moment you stop asking the world to see you and start seeing the one who made you? What if the real awakening is not realizing who you are, but remembering who you belong toward? If everything you're clinging to, the comfort, the control, the certainty, is the very thing keeping you from truly living? What if life isn't about holding on, but about letting go, about trusting something far greater than what you can see or understand? That realization hit me like a wave when Islam taught me the power of tawakkul. Trusting God completely. I had spent years building walls of fear around myself, mistaking them for safety. I thought if I planned enough, worked enough, controlled enough, I could prevent disappointment. But the harder I tried to control life, the more it slipped through my fingers. Then Islam came and whispered a truth so radical, so liberating, that it turned my world upside down. You are not in control. You never were. At first, that idea terrified me. How could surrendering control possibly bring peace? It sounded like weakness, like giving up. But Islam showed me that trust in God is not the absence of effort. It's the freedom from anxiety. It's the courage to move forward even when the path ahead disappears into fog. It's the strength to say, I will try with all my might, and I will accept whatever he decrees. It's not passive submission, it's active faith. I remember a time when everything I depended on fell apart. Plans crumbled, doors closed, people vanished. I was left staring into the ruins of what I thought was my future. Panic rose like fire in my chest. But then, almost instinctively, my heart remembered the words, and whoever puts his trust in Allah, he will suffice him. It was like cold water on burning skin. I realized that my fear came not from the situation, but from the illusion that I had ever been in control. When I finally stopped wrestling with destiny and placed it back in the hands of the one who wrote it, something incredible happened. The fear dissolved. I didn't need to know how things would end. I only needed to know who was in charge of the ending. The shock was not in losing control. It was in discovering peace within it. Islam taught me that the world is not meant to be predictable. It's meant to be trusted. Every delay, every heartbreak, every closed door is not a punishment, but a redirection. When something you prayed for doesn't come, it's not rejection, it's protection. But you only see that truth when you stop fighting fate and start walking with it. Before Islam, I used to live like a soldier at war with the unknown. Every uncertainty felt like an enemy. But Islam turned that war into worship. It showed me that uncertainty is not chaos, it's mercy. Because if you knew everything that was coming, there would be no need for faith, no room for wonder, no growth through patience. The unpredictability of life isn't a flaw in the design, it's the test that shapes you. I began to see how tawakkul transforms fear into fuel. It doesn't erase hardship, it gives it meaning. It doesn't stop the storm, it anchors you through it. The one who trusts Allah doesn't walk through life asking, why me? He walks asking, what is this teaching me? That shift in perspective changes everything. Suddenly every trial becomes a message, every setback a secret blessing. You stop begging for control and start praying for wisdom. And then comes the most shocking realization of all. When you truly trust God, you are never disappointed. Because even when things don't go as planned, they still go as intended. You realize that what is written for you will reach you, even if it's beneath 2 mountains. And what isn't meant for you will never touch you, even if it stands before your eyes. That kind of faith doesn't make life easier, it makes it unbreakable. There's a strange, fierce beauty in trusting God. It's not the fragile peace of ignorance. It's the unshakable calm of surrender. When everyone else panics, you stay grounded, not because you're fearless, but because you know the author of fate never writes without reason. The believer walks through fire knowing it will either burn away his sins or forge his strength. Either way, he wins. Islam didn't make my life predictable, it made it purposeful. It didn't take away uncertainty, taught me to breathe within it. Every time I say, Hasbunallahu wa ni'mal wakeel, Allah is sufficient for us, and He is the best disposer of affairs, it feels like placing my heart into the safest hands in existence. And every single time those hands catch me. What if the peace you're looking for isn't at the end of your plans, but at the end of your need to control them? What if faith isn't about getting what you want, but trusting that whatever you get is exactly what you need? What if the most powerful thing you can ever say in this world of uncertainty is not, I know what's coming, but I know who's guiding me, and so, my friends, when I say Islam opened my eyes to a new way of life, I do not speak of a quiet change, but of a revolution within the soul. It was as though a curtain had been torn, and for the first time I could see light where I once saw only shadow. Islam taught me that every breath is purpose, every challenge a test, every act an opportunity to rise above the self. It forged in me a courage deeper than pride, a peace stronger than fear, and a vision that reaches beyond this fleeting world. If I have learned one truth, it is this: when you surrender to the Creator, you do not fall, you rise. And the higher you rise, the clearer you see that faith is not a chain. It is the key that unlocks the gates of true freedom. To all who listen today, may your journey lead you not just to answers, but to awakening. May your heart find the courage to seek truth, even when it shakes your world. Good luck, my friends. Thank you for walking with me, if only for a moment, through this light that changed my life.